Hey guys, my name is Matt. I'm an architectural artist and AI enthusiast. Been working on developing methods to include real practical uses for Stable Diffusion in our everyday graphic workflow. So today I'm going to show you how to take a 3D model of a girl that I have here, and we're going to slowly try to work on the theory about how we improve this while keeping some of the original character. And then we also have something really simple where we're going to add complex texture and bake it onto a simple mesh. This is all part from this scene that I did last year, and so we're using this character and just trying to improve it and see if we can render something like this strictly with Stable Diffusion, TyDiffusion. So let's go. We'll start with everything default, and the first thing you want to do is match the resolution of your TyDiffusion to your screen output diffusion, and he's included this nice little box here, so you click that, and that's definitely best practice, is to have these match, because whatever you generate is going to be this resolution. It doesn't matter what this is. And so if you scale it, you'll see the image in the background has been cropped to fit. So we have our default settings. Personally, I like 2M SDE Keras. There's a GPU version, it's a little bit faster, and stick with the Keras. And from that, if you don't have Juggernaut installed, I would recommend that one, or I'm going to use Photogasm. And our fluffy red cat prompt, we're going to obviously not use that. I was thinking about putting a rusty door with a little logo on it, and so I'm going to copy and paste. I just have a working text document that I keep open, and that allows me to just kind of keep track of some of the prompts that I'm testing and go back to one that works. For your negative prompts, good practice, I like to have CGI rendering, painting, and cartoon. We separate all of our prompts with a comma, unless we're building a sentence and using some type of description like forest in the background. You know, that kind of thing's okay. But in this case, I just want the checkpoint model to reference photorealistic imagery. Okay, we have everything set up. I'm going to keep this thing within the frame, and we'll just hit generate. What it's doing is having a default built-in control net, and the genius here that Tyson's come up with is to use the viewport. What it's looking at is this. This is what this control net is default checked on. That's really useful. Without that, you're just generating nothing from the text, so it has nothing to go on. In this case, it has something to hold on to. We'll go back to the result. It's not exactly what I want, so I'm going to do another one a little more head-on, but it still has to be able to pick up the depth. We don't have auto seed turned on, so I'm going to turn on auto seed, and then we'll get a different result each time. Don't want that. And of course, 512 by 512 is kind of shitty, so we can, with version 1.5, still go up pretty easily to 1024 by 1024. It'll just take a little bit longer, of course, but you'll have a higher resolution. In this case, then I would also, if I can generate at that resolution, then I'll use an SDXL model. So that looks pretty cool, except for the weird little rivets. That's a little bit more what I was looking for. All right, we're going to bake that. Select the objects, bake it, save it, test 2. Yeah, so it's baked, and I think that's amazing. I mean, that's like I think that's a really practical use. The cool thing is too is you can remove the letters, and if you don't need the 3D effect, they're baked right on to the plate, and so there's a good use to create a quick AI result. All right, the next thing we should cover is some image to image. Let's say, for example, that you have this object that you really like, right? Now it's baked on, and you don't want to alter it. You don't want to keep generating, but you want to add something to it. Well, you want to use the original. We have our original image. And if I hit generate now, of course, it's going to just do something completely new, because all it's doing is still looking at the black and white grayscale image of our background. This is where we come into, I'll close that. This is where we go to our text image, or imaged image. In this case, now it's set to viewport color. And so it's going to see our existing background. So if I go to our existing image. So it's going to take a combination. And so it's going to use some of this material. And how much it uses is determined on the denoising value. And so the real magic for Stable Diffusion comes into our denoising and how much we alter the image that we started with. So there's a lot of that. So when I do architectural rendering and I want to change one of my vegetations that doesn't render too well, it looks too fake, I want to take most of that image and then just give it a little bit of a polish or enhancement with my Stable Diffusion models. Let's move to something more complicated. I have this campfire scene, and I'll first just take one of these characters and give you a few examples of what you can do with a character since I have one here. If you wanted to render this this gentleman, you'll get the best results if you keep him closer in the frame, all right? So we have our 1024 matches our viewport, and we're still using a Epic Photogasm model. I use steps typically around 35. For speed, I'm going to just keep it at 25. And our CFG is how much the AI is looking at your prompts and how much flexibility it should give to what typically for image to image it works a little more, but the prompts here, how much does it want to fit the description? Higher value means pay attention to the prompts. Lower the value means have more flexibility. That's the rough answer explanation I can give. Okay, everything else here's the same. Now we're using our depth, so that means that all it's going to see is the Z pass basically of our character, and it's not going to have any resemblance to the underlying man other than just the structure of the face. Okay, and I have here handsome man in his 40s, holding a beer, depth of field, blurry background in a pub. Now I can get the blurry background depth of field isn't working too well. I think it's because I have depth of field, but we can say probably bright sunny day. And again, it's going to be just a random gentleman. Okay, there we go. This is similar to what we had in the Tyson's promo videos, right? Okay, so there we go. It looks a little faded, but that's okay. We're going to take. I wanted to show you if you had a consistent character and you wanted to keep the face. Let's use the girl, and wow, those are really poor quality. We're not going to use those. We'll use this lady here, and let me just start by. Okay, that's going off just on the depth pass, right? That's built in. So this is what it's using. If we wanted to keep more of this character, despite how terrible it is, let's say we really want to keep her sweater, all right? I'll render it again. You can see because we're just doing text to image, it's going to have no idea or no reference to the underlying imagery. We wanted to go, this is where we're going to use our, it's adding a little bit of a filter or something up there. Okay, so we're going to take this to image, and the default I think was 0.7, and this is percentage. I think I covered a little bit of depth or image to image. This is what I use most of the time, is improving a rendering by enhancing it with a combination of the base image and then our prompts. So if we take this denoising up to 100 or 1, then we're getting the same thing as we have now, though that's essentially the same thing. It's not using any of the base image. The lowering the value towards 0, now if we go to our denoising of 0, we're using all of the base image, and then it basically just mapped her the exact viewport on and just recreated the viewport. So we want to do something in between, so let's do 50%. So that means 50% of the prompt and 50% of the viewport image in this case. And so it's just enough that it's changing her, and unfortunately the viewport image, the quality isn't very good in my case. So like that, this model has a lot of it's just like the skin is a little bit weird, you know, so it's not an ideal situation, but we're getting a little bit closer into that pattern of the sweater. So what we need to put in a prompt, gray and white sweater. It's going to be really difficult to get those patterns because they probably don't exist within the checkpoint model. And you can say something like, you can give it some adjectives like soft, gray and white, fluffy, soft. See if that sort of makes it a little more realistic. Okay, so that's how the image to image, or the denoising, works on image to image, and it's using the viewport. If you wanted to, say, render her out and then use the image as opposed to the viewport, you go here to the viewport color, and then you do the render color, images, and then here you load the rendering, and instead of the viewport it'll be the rendering. But I don't think I have this all set up for doing that right now. Let's go on to a full scene now. We have our campfire image, and we're going to have a lot of problems with the face. All right, there's no way from that distance, especially on a 1.5 model, that we're going to be able to get a to have these faces rendered out. So don't even bother trying. You can see that without the prompts, it has no idea what it's looking at. Again, I mean, I really want to stress this part. This is all it has to go on right now when you do text to image, right? So I think the real power when this comes through, when you start using it more, will be viewport maps to give it a hint of what it's looking at. I have so many ideas for tutorials. The idea that you have to provide some sort of information. You could render this out and use it as an image to image and then run it again. But at that point, you're just making a rendering anyways. And when you use a rendering, especially if you're doing ArchViz, if you're watching this as an ArchViz artist, you have to have a much higher resolution and work in sections. And I have all these tutorials. That's a perfect time for a plug. I have the whole tutorial series where I convert Google Earth into a photorealistic. I have reposing, all the posings you ever want to know how to do. We have a separate character. I have a free section that you can get started with a whole bunch of interesting videos about all the different. We have all these different install methods, different programs, so you can get started there. It's all about architecture. I have upscaling, some motion, and then of course, if you want to buy the whole thing, then you can have lots of 7 hours of information in there, okay? And here's my examples you might want to check out. Here's the upscaling method. Here's that scene that I'm working on right now. You can see it's a huge difference from the rendering and how much I've changed using just straight Stable Diffusion. So we go through some of that on the tutorials. Okay, back to we're going to attempt to render this, and we're going to need more than just a prompt and a black and white image. So we'll figure out how to do that. Here's the prompt I've decided to come up with. Photo of a campfire, stone fire pit, wooden logs, dirt and grass, water, lake, forest in the distance, starry sky, dock chairs, man holding can, woman. And I forgot night. Photo of a campfire, man and woman. It didn't get woman. Doesn't recognize probably her short hair. All right, night certainly helps. Now, I'm going to switch over to an SDXL model because it's more designed for this level of complexity at a 1024 ratio, okay? We have our Epic Realism XL. We're going to try that. Okay, when you get this error, that means that your control net is on the wrong version, all right? So we just simply switch over to XDXL. That's what that error means. Yeah, it's going to do a better job, I think, with the fire pit particularly. Some crazy Milky Way sort of thing going on there. Some dudes. See this pattern that's happening right here? And so the fade, even though on my viewport and even the way you're watching this all looks really smooth. All right, I added a turbo smooth there, so that should help smooth that gradation out. But even though it looked smooth, that's sort of the kind of the problem. But even still, it can happen for all sorts of reasons. All right, if you want to see what this image is going to look like without anything, turn your control nets off. And we're on text to image. So this is going to be the sheer capabilities of your model without anything in the scene. All right, just so you can see if your prompts are enough. And you notice that what's happening here is that the prompts at the end are less attention. So I think what we need to do is photos of a campfire with a man and woman sitting on logs at night. Let's see if you move the prompt to the front. We'll have we'll get something more fitting. So this is really close to what our actual existing image. Now, if let's say we have this background, which is pretty good. Let's go ahead and we'll render this. And I want one where I don't have that, whatever, it keeps looking like a chicken leg or something that's popping up. It's the depth. Here's a good thing that's a good time to mention. This is where you want to drop the ending step. And this is, see this happening because it's trying to conform, and we go and reference our input. Do you see how strong the fire mesh is that I've made? It was having trouble. It was putting fire in different locations, so that's why I made that little picture. But it doesn't see it as a picture. It sees it as this blob. And what we can do is take off some of our depth. And you're making a rendering, but you're not, everything doesn't have to be perfectly aligned because you're not baking. In that case, what you want to do is you take your steps down to 0.8. And so that means that it's going to work on this image with your control net. And then at 80% of the steps, they stop, and then it removes the control net from it, and it just goes on continuing generating sort of on its own as a real text to image. And you see, here's the problem I had where this front object was turning into a fire. It had more flexibility as it started to generate, and it no longer conforms perfectly to each person's shape by that ending step. So that is a great tool to just bring down to 0.75 to 100 on your depth. Now, the other element which I haven't found works in a strange way that I'm not expecting is the line art and the canny. Line art, they're really strongly defined in TyDiffusion, where I was getting some real strong hard lines when I used the soft edge. Line art was pretty typical, but you can see that it's actually rendering out the actual, what you can't see is the pass. I've seen a lot of these passes, and so it really kind of looks like a black and white sketch. And in this case, the implementation seems to be really harsh on it. So you would have to bring down your control net and maybe even your weight to so it only uses a portion of that. And now instead of using the depth, we're simply using that edge in order to send the AI something to build upon. So you can see that that's not as great as our depth option for control net. You can use both. I'm not going to get into any of the other options here, but right today. But we'll go through a little bit of how would we generate this still. Now, I think you go through and you bake each object. That's how I feel, and so that everything kind of looks, especially the ground. I think it would be really cool to bake this ground into really matching the scene. And then when you go to render it, you'll have completely customized texture. We have to talk about upscaling in another video. Oh my goodness, there's so much to talk about. But here is where you would want to use either a rendering and pull that in, or we'll attempt to use a little bit of the viewport. And that's, of course, the whole benefit of using TyDiffusion is that you're using your viewport. Now, so this is now I have the denoising. Remember how we talk about how the denoising is a percentage? So this is 70% of our images actually is the prompt, 30% is the base. And you can see there's a lot of cohesion to, oh, it didn't get any of that stuff over there. Turned it into a tree. So it has a lot of, almost too much. So we're going to keep our denoise. We just want to use a little bit. So that means only 10% of the image. So that's 10% of, that's 10% of this. So kind of get an idea where the fire is. These look a lot different. I could turn on the texture map of these, but I felt for some reason that was cheating. There we go. Okay, and then if I turn this one on, see, I think that if you were to do this from scratch, all of those this is the idea, you would bake it and it would sort of look like this. So I'll get rid of this log because that was going to be a texture bake, but I did the... All right, we'll render this now, and we should have a little more. Yeah, that's a little bit more what I wanted. You see how it's having a hard time with the background? We have our depth on. I would take, our depth is at 90, so I'm going to bring that down to 8. bring this down to 0.85. Again, so we're just taking the edge off of the final generation, so it has a little more flexibility and it's not looking at that map anymore. Although, of course, it comes with limitations because now our fire pit no longer has stone. So I think we'll have to stick to 0.9. I usually leave this at 1. And then you can also put in just a little bit of line art. You don't even need much. You can bring these values down and turn that on and have a just the right amount so that you're combining all these loose elements into your final image. And you're going to have to just Photoshop this stuff out because it just doesn't know what that is because it's too small of a portion on the screen, just like it is with the characters. Okay, Laureates for styles. You can download. Oh shoot, I had to download everything again. All right, guys, I think we have to call it here because I am getting carried away on this campfire scene, and I've done no prep. We're 20 minutes in, and that's going to be the total length of this video, I think, by the time I edit it. So I hope you found it useful, and I covered the stuff that you were looking for. But there's so many things to go over. This is a really wicked application for Stable Diffusion. And if you did find it useful and you got something out of it, you could do the comment, like, and subscribe thing. I got a small YouTube channel. See what happens with it, with your support. And yeah, take care, guys. Bye.